Wednesday night rugby on Off the Ball
with Eir Sport, the home of rugby in Ireland. Visit eirsport.ie.
November Internationals are kicking off this weekend. We have Ruaidhri O'Connor from the Irish Independent in studio. Thanks for coming in.
Of course.
And Keith Wood, you're there?
I am indeed. How are you?
Good. So this time 2 years ago, you two were gallivanting around Chicago.
Yeah, we have a great life when things happen. Do you know what? I often don't go to away games at all. This was soon after Anthony Foley's passing.
Yeah.
And I have to say, that was the reason for going, not actually the Ireland All Black game. It was just an opportunity to kind of go away and think of something else. Of course, there was Anthony Foley. He was all over the place in the figure of eight on the field. And I knew half the crowd that were there, and I kept bumping into everybody. You didn't get away from anything. But it was, it still goes down for me as one of my favourite rugby memories, actually, being there in that crowd, seeing the eight beforehand, knowing the poignancy of it, looking at the performance, thinking we were going to lose because we'd done so often before. And then I think just seeing the try at the very end, the quality of the play in the whole game, the atmosphere. I did a off the ball chat as I was walking out of the ground afterwards, walking through everybody. It was hilarious because it was just the happiest place of all time. Of course, the All Blacks were miserable and New Zealand supporters. That's a lovely thing to see as well. And it was just fantastic. It was. It goes down as one of the. I played for most of my life, played for Ireland. You know, played for 12 seasons with Ireland and never got the chance to do it. And then 12 years afterwards, or whatever it was, you get the chance to see it. It was as good as playing it itself. It was just awesome. Fantastic.
Well, rest assured, Ruaidhri O'Connor had the week of his life. He was running around.
I'm pretty sure I saw you there as well, John.
Giddy as hell. I was working. So, I mean, we're back in Chicago then. It's not the same wattage, this game, obviously. It's part of a bigger picture. It's maybe easier to give you the players left at home. So Rory Best, probably not surprisingly, and Johnny Sexton very much left at home. Cian Healy's been left at home, as has Ian Henderson. And then of back rowers, we have Dan Levy, who's not going, though you were saying, Rory, just a minute ago, he's playing with Leinster this weekend.
He's gone to play the Southern Kings in Port Elizabeth, which means I don't think he'll be back till Tuesday, which means he probably won't play next week, which is another one chalked off, you know, your kind of prospective Argentina team. Yeah.
Peter O'Mahony stays as well, bit of a knock. CJ Standard doesn't travel. Sean O'Brien doesn't travel. Might get your thoughts on that in a second. And then in the backs, Rob Kearney has picked up a bit of a bang, so he doesn't travel. Nor does Robbie Henshaw. Both Aki and Ringrose do. Nor does Keith Earls. So the squad has been stripped of
nearly all the centrally contracted players.
Core group.
It very much looks like the shell of a team that will face Argentina next week. Because they're only getting back on Monday. So, you know, there is a tight turnaround next week, and Joe stayed back drilling them. So, like, it does make the selection picture a little bit clearer going into next week. I was surprised O'Brien didn't go just because he's a bit shy in game time, and while he played well in Toulouse, he did look a little bit rusty. Levy's obviously, they feel like he hasn't played enough, so he's gone off to South Africa. Don't think we'll see him until the USA game. You know, could be wrong on that, but it's interesting that because of this trip to Chicago, it almost makes the selection picture a little bit clearer for us. It's hard to tell who's going to play this weekend, but I think the Argentina team is kind of taking shape there. You've got your major leaders, you know, kind of preparing, doing the groundwork this week with Joe in Carton House before Joe flew out today to name his team tomorrow. So it's an interesting one.
Yeah, he delayed his travels out. So in effect, you feel this core group will play the two games, Argentina and New Zealand. There'll be no wrapping up in cotton wool for Argentina.
No, you wouldn't have thought so. I think it'll go 90% Argentina. You might flit around the edges, try a couple of things out. Maybe, you know, he's got so many back row and centre options. He might kind of trial one week and another the next. But obviously New Zealand will be the strongest possible team. Maybe with Conor Murray in it. We'll never know.
Well, yeah, we'll come to that in a moment. Is that, though, Keith, broadly how you see the next 3 weeks going?
It is, and I think you could see it from the selections for last week. Excuse me, for the provinces last week. People were kind of wondering, God Almighty, Peter O'Mahony's playing another game, but it is another game. I was saying, well, there's no way he's going on the plane to the States, and the same for an awful lot of players. It is the benefit of our centrally contracted system. Where you know that they're going to have to have one game to get up to the really big game. and so that will be Argentina. And Argentina is a notoriously difficult game to play in anyway. So you're going to be fully battle hardened. You'll have had the week's rest. You'll have trained. You'll have sharpened up whatever you need to sharpen up, and hopefully everybody will be okay. And I looked at it when that 42-man squad was announced, and I said, we've never been in a situation where you could send one squad out of the country and still play a full international. I know the Italian team seems to be a little bit inexperienced as well, but that is the benefit of this particular game, of being able to play in another country against a Six Nations team, which I know some people are not happy about, but because we've got, it's almost like an A fixture, but it's billed as a full test because it is a full test. But a lot of the players there would not be starters for Ireland, all things being equal, and obviously not because the rest of them are staying at home. But that's fine. I think that's a great place to be a year out.
Okay, and in broad terms, I mean, we all understand it from an Irish perspective, and the New Zealand game is the biggest game here by some distance. But one of the great things about rugby is that the rugby doesn't have friendlies in the same way that football does.
Yeah.
And it's great, and you want to protect that insofar as you can. You wouldn't love to see this trend creeping into the game more often than not.
Look, there's a philosophical conversation we need to have at some stage over the next little while, because there is an encroachment of more international players going, but we also know that that's where the funding comes from. So the pragmatist in me says, yeah, okay, I'm selling my soul just a little bit to say that we've had another game going on over here, but if it means that we're viable going forward, maybe that's what we need to be able to do. I'm not as comfortable with that, really. But actually, when I look at this particular test and I look at the players that are playing in it and how it's been structured, I can live with that, because I think it bloods a lot of players up to a very tough international away from home. And we might say that, yeah, it's not that tough and they're not as full. It doesn't matter. You play in the pressure of 50,000 people. This is the biggest game for an awful lot of those players, and they get their chance to put their hand up for selection. So for me, it's a reasonable one. If I was looking at the full Irish team going out to play another game there and coming back to play for the whole of November, I would be saying, listen, we have to call a halt to some of this.
Look, the strategic review published a couple of weeks ago showed that 80% of the funding comes from the international team. Rory and Keith has outlined the various philosophical points here. Does a part of your heart sink, though, that is a test match like this somewhat devalued? Does it make the public kind of think, I may catch that, I may not catch it, kind of an attitude?
I'm not a huge fan of it. I think if I was in the Six Nations building, I'd be kind of concerned. I'd be concerned at Scotland playing Wales and Ireland playing Italy this weekend. They're struggling to sell a sponsor. It's the biggest, or they have been. I think they have one lined up now, but they have had trouble selling a sponsor for the last couple of years, or signing a sponsor up. And the Six Nations is special, and this encroaches on it a little bit. It's worth $1 million to the IRFU. It's an extra window for Joe Schmidt to see players. So there's, and as you say, it's 80% of the revenue, and it's going to be, it boosts that nicely. And next year there'll be no November international. So, but this is closer to a World Cup warm-up game than it is to what we normally experience in November. And there is something about, like, November is when the Southern Hemisphere big hitters come up. It's just part of the furniture. Yeah. If the Six Nations teams are playing each other out of Six Nations window, I just don't see the attraction. I don't think there's going to be a huge crowd at the game at the weekend. I know there's 2 other games on it as well. I don't think if this was in Dublin, look, they've sold out at USA, so maybe I'll be wrong. If fans keep turning up, then happy days. But I do think there will be a little bit of international rugby fatigue. It's supposed to be special, it's supposed to be different, and this doesn't feel that special or different, but I can see the benefits of doing it and why A, Joe Schmidt, and B, the IRFU want to do it. I just think if I was doing if I was running the Six Nations, I'd be almost putting in the contract of the participants who are, that competition is owned by these countries, and it's one of the big drivers. So you just don't want a long-term, you might get a short-term reward, a long-term reward. I think long-term, you just have to be careful that you preserve what's really strong, what's really good, because, I just don't see the attraction of Ireland playing Italy at this time.
Rhys Ruddock's captain, Keith, And Simon Easterby said that he led really well in the USA and Japan in 2017. He's definitely a guy we see a lot of leadership qualities in. I mean, it's funny for Ruddock. I mean, I probably would have been captain either way, but Dan Levy goes down injured in the warm-up against Wasps, and Ruddock comes on and plays quite brilliantly. And, you know, moments like that can inject massive momentum into your season. So Ruddock is top of the ground at the moment.
Well, I think he is, but I also think he is firmly acknowledged as a captain, and there are certain skills that are required, composure under fire, and ability to give a bit of flack out, even if he's not playing at top of his game, which I would know plenty about. And but there is that sense of authority that he has. And I also think when you look at the Irish team now, you'd look and say there are a number of players that are of the calibre to be international captain, and you can share the load with that. I think it's a good time for him. He is a player that suffers too much from injury. He is big, wholehearted, gets stuck into everything, but unfortunately carries that a lot. So, you know, we've seen great play from him before. I think if he's fit, you know what he's going to be able to give. And I think he's an ideal guy to be captain, because I don't think he'll feel it as any pressure. I think it's something that sits comfortably on his shoulders. So I'd have no issue about that whatsoever. I will say, when I look at him, I think he's unlucky in terms of the injuries he gets. Maybe he has a little bit of luck this time, you know, but it rarely ever evens out fully.
He's unlucky as well that he has come into he's available at a time when Peter O'Mahony has just been, you know, consistently first choice over the course of his career. And Ruddock, you know, every time he gets momentum, Keith's right, he just gets cut down by injuries. But he's captained Ireland at every level since he came across from playing with Wales at underage level. Leinster love him. You know, he's on a contract that's on par with some of the full-blown internationals, because Leinster value him so much. Whenever they play big French teams, they almost always pick Rhys Ruddock because he's so powerful. And I think if Peter O'Mahony, it's one of those positions where there's so much depth. If Peter O'Mahony can't play for some reason, Rhys Ruddock is just such an able deputy. We saw it when Chris Henry went down a couple of years ago in the warm-up again, the morning of the South Africa game. He stepped in at open side and was man of the match. Yeah. That Wasps game, he just has a really good attitude. He's really unflappable. Even when you interview him, he barely skips a beat. He sidesteps every question. He's one of those guys. I think he's a player's player, and the professionals love him. Yeah. And
to be fair, half the reason he probably wasn't playing against Wasps was with Toulouse in mind the following week.
I definitely think that was probably on the cards.
Yeah. We are here. Sorry, Keith. Yeah, go on.
Yes, but I'd equally say, and timing is often so important. And I just think when you look at maybe what's happening in Munster at the present moment in time with Tadhg Byrne and how he's playing, for me he looks more like the heir apparent as a 6 than Rhys Ruddock, because it's more similar to the manner in which Peter O'Mahony plays, going for the breakdowns, light to throw up in the air, able to marshal a line out incredibly well. They're just different types of players, you know. It's kind of cool that we have different types of players, and you can play a different game if you need to. So I don't know that you necessarily put Tadhg Byrne on the bench to kind of cover Peter when you have Rhys Ruddock fully fit. I think it's entirely horses for courses.
I must say, like Rory, I did expect Sean O'Brien to travel. What's his status in that Irish back row at present? Is that, you know, if Sean O'Brien is even 3/4 fit, he plays. Is that status being challenged? Has it been properly challenged, or where is he?
Chicago in 2016 probably disproved that theory, because he didn't travel to face the All Blacks. Now he was back in 2 weeks later. I don't know if Joe Schmidt has a depth chart, you know, a spreadsheet somewhere that ranks all of the players, but I would imagine that Sean O'Brien remains number 1, number 7. I mean, he's a 2-time lion. He has the full respect of the New Zealanders, which is not easily got, and not many Irish players have it. And while Levy was sensational last year, Van der Fleer is so energetic and reliable. Jordy Murphy is again another player who's never let Joe Schmidt down. O'Brien is one of those just blue chip players that Ireland have, and sometimes because he's been around for so long, he almost stops being fashionable. A little like Rob Kearney, but every time Ireland have played New Zealand when he's been fit, he's been playing, he's performed. You know, every time the Lions have, he was sensational 2 years ago, last year. Sorry. So I think he's still number 1. But I don't think the distance between him and the pack is as big. And I think if he's off a little bit, Joe has full trust in 3 other options, which is an unbelievable place to be. And I think picking the back row, I think Keith's right with Tadhg Byrne, who I think will probably wear the number 19 jersey in the 2 big games, covering second row and back row. Yeah. There's just such dynamism, so many different options, different players. You can, as the horses for courses thing, you can pick Van der Fleer against Argentina for his athleticism, but you might need O'Brien's physicality. He has so many options, and I think picking the right team for each of these games is probably going to be Joe Schmidt's toughest challenge.
Yes,
because he never has all of these players fit, and he may never have them all fit again.
It's the nature of that position increasingly, isn't it? We are here with Eir Sport, home of rugby in Ireland, and this week they are broadcasting Ireland against Italy, by the way. So kick-off is at 8 o'clock. They're on air from 7:30. It's going to be live on Facebook and YouTube, so check out all the social channels there for the latest ahead of that game. Keith, what is your best Irish back row? And ignore the horses for courses argument for just a second here. Humour me. Just what is on paper your best Irish back row at present?
Yeah, that's if Rory's just said that's Joe's most difficult one, thank you for asking me just to give you a one-liner straight away. Peter Mahoney at 6, CJ Stander at 8, and for me it's any of the three of Josh Van der Fleer, Levy or Sean O'Brien. I think Sean O'Brien is top of the tree, but he needs to have a long period of time where he's injury free, and he needs to be playing a lot of rugby to stay top of the tree. But we've never had that sense of depth. I know people would think CJ Stander hasn't played maybe to the same standard that we'd seen him play before. I think he's having to do a different role, and I think over a period of time, I was very critical of Jamie Heaslip because I thought he was taking away from some of the power elements that he used to have in his younger years towards the end of his career. I'm seeing a bit of that from CJ at the moment, but I'm also seeing some of the qualities that people would talk about with Jamie is he doesn't get hurt, is he does a huge amount of work. There is an incredible amount of work that's done around the field. But for me, with that back row, we almost need to pick Sean O'Brien for the power to get over the gain line, because at the present moment in time, that is not incredibly dynamic anymore because of the work rate and the amount of games that CJ's played in the last 2 years. That bursting run that bops somebody that gets 10 yards over the gain line isn't happening as much anymore. So it may go for an element of something different is needed in there. But I think that's one that you would start with, but knowing full well if you need to chop it up a little, Tyg Byrne can go in and have a bit of a streaky run. But I do think we need to have a back row that gets over the gain line a little bit more. And I think I won't say fallen into that because the amount of work they do is incredible. But for me, the balance of that now is slightly different. And I don't know whether that's off or not. I'm not sure.
Okay, interesting. Do get your tweets, texts in for the lads. We're streaming on Facebook at the moment, and you could win our Heineken Star Comment of the Week, get some great prizes, and win some matchday tickets and off the ball branded goodies as well. I'll get to some tweets and texts in a moment. We can't really go too much further without mentioning the Conor Murray situation, because it looms large over this November. Simon Easterby speaking in Chicago. No, he hasn't been ruled out of the New Zealand game. It's a bit like some of the others. He's been on a longer term injury list, but he is in camp this week. He has been in Carton House, and we'll assess him as we go through the series. Steve Hansen a few weeks ago said, is Conor really going to be out, or is it a trick, is what Hansen said. So he's, I would suspect, in some respects, planning for Conor Murray to play. What are we hearing, Rory? What are the rumours?
The rumours are flying, and Ron O'Gara hopped the ball first on Friday, and that ball hopped over to Japan on Saturday with Steve Hansen, and then it hopped back this time. It needs to be in Chicago, and now it's back in our court here. Simon, if he's training in Carton House, that is an indication that they think he has a chance. And otherwise, why would you have him there? I know he's been able to train, and they've only got one scrum half if Marmion is there. Marmion looks like he's going to play for Connacht this weekend.
Because he said last week, Murray, that he was targeting, say, Edinburgh Zebre territory at the end of November. Yeah. So I mean, if you're targeting them, if in your head you would say, well, I'm going to leave the November internationals, you would only rush back for Zebre or Edinburgh in the Pro 14 if you were well and truly ready. Yeah. Which suggests that there is just the distinct possibility that November 17th might be doable. It depends on just his aerobic fitness. It depends on getting the all clear. You suspect the all clear is going to happen, and it might be just, well, can we get 50 good minutes out of this guy physically?
Definitely. And if they can, they will feel they have to play him, even though there is a long-term investment in not playing him this month. Yes. If he's anyway fit, you're trading off, you've such a much better chance of beating the All Blacks with him there. So, the long-term trade-off of having Kieran Marmion start and get that experience versus the benefit of beating the All Blacks and kicking into a World Cup year on the back of that. It is a difficult one to play him cold, but they won't take that risk unless they're completely sure.
Yeah.
And we have seen players come back after long absences recently and do really well in the first game back.
So Robbie Henshaw for Leinster looms large.
Yeah, and the conditioning they're in, the work they're doing is excellent. So I'd have less worry about that. So if they do feel he's ready, is it silly buggers? Are they trying to play mind games? Are they trying to pull the wool over the All Blacks' eyes? It's hard to know with this remove, but the fact that he's been in there, I think I would be edging towards they might do an updated squad on the Monday of the All Blacks game and suddenly Conor Murray's there. There's no Munster game to get him fit the week before, which is a bit unfortunate. You'd almost think they'd probably send him out this week to South Africa if they thought that he had a chance. But at the same time, they might be just quietly confident that he's of that quality that he can come back in. It's a hell of an ask.
Big ask.
He is so he's so close to what he's so close to matching up to what the All Blacks have. He's a world class player against world class players.
Yeah.
But I wonder in the long term, would Ireland have benefited more from Marmion or Luke McGrath starting, because there's no guarantee that Conor Murray gets through a World Cup unscathed, and he's started 80% of our internationals since the last World Cup.
We're back to another philosophical conversation, I fear, Keith.
We don't have to be in this one. I'd say if he's fit, he plays, and it's up to the S&C guys, the coaches, to say what's he like. If he's fit, get him to play. Would you send him down to South Africa? For me, not a chance. Absolutely not a chance. There's no benefit in doing that for him. You would trust Munster to be able to go there and do the job that they need to be able to do. If he's training with the squad, if he's close to it, he is conscientious trainer. He's going to be as fit. I honestly, I wouldn't even be looking at 50 minutes for him. If he's back, the expectation would be for him to be back for up to 70 minutes. And equally well, we're going to see different scrum half playing this match, different scrum half probably playing against Argentina, and a different scrum half playing against the US. There are games. This is the best orchestrated November series, really, for Ireland in terms of the types of teams that we're going to play. I don't see it as being a risk. A lot of people who aren't used to this level of sport would say, "Oh, there's a huge risk. He's coming back from an injury." He's fit. If he's fit, he's fit to play. In terms of the intensity, I think this is the sort of thing that would just light his wick. I think he'd be up for it too. So, but you don't know.
No.
And if we don't pick him, it's because they don't want to take a risk, which means he isn't right. And that's fine. I think there is a benefit somewhere down the line, but trying to take those sort of views into what happened 3 years ago, there was no players playing any other matches. And since that period of time, yes, there has been. Yes, we have got a flurry of players who are playing week in, week out for our provinces that qualify. So there's a lot of players playing at a high standard. Before the last World Cup, especially at out half, our players were not. We didn't have any depth chart for the simple reason that Jimmy Gopperth was being picked for Leinster ahead of Ian Madigan. Ian Madigan was not getting a chance to go and play. That's the disconnect. Now we're seeing a very different sort of landscape. The players are playing week in, week out, and they're playing some of the internationals as well.
So it's Cooney and McGrath who've travelled, Rory.
Yeah.
And Marmion stays. What does that tell us?
Well, I think Marmion will play against Argentina.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. And then even if you're picking Carbery, he does this kind of, he likes to put a bit of experience around Carbery. So he'll probably Luke McGrath. They've played together. Why not keep that combination together?
Yeah. Cooney
off the bench with Bundy Aki as his bouncer beside him. That kind of thing. There's clever things happening in terms of selection. You're looking at the squad that travelled, and you're just not quite sure why some of them are them. But then if you put it together, it starts to make sense. I'm not sure how it's all going to line up. But
sure.
I mean, if Will Addison's given his debut at 13, for example, why not have Bundy Aki beside him? Because he's one of those players who just takes the pressure off those around them.
Surround guys with experience.
Yeah.
Ross Byrne is the other uncapped player going out. I presume he'll get on at some stage.
He'll be on the bench. I think so. I think they feel a little bit bad that they didn't get him on again in that last test against Australia. The plan was, I'm sure, to get him a cap over there. He wanted to cap everyone, but just the way that the final test went, they couldn't take Johnny off. So yeah, I think everyone will get on this weekend. That's in the 23 because of the nature of the game as well.
There's a Facebook comment in from Ben Everard wondering who the lads think is the centre partnership for New Zealand. And I was just looking, Rory, you did that very foolish thing where you tried to guess 4 teams for November, which was just glutton for punishment. The big surprise or noteworthy point for me is that Ireland-New Zealand game 3, you have Robbie Henshaw and Bundy Aki, whereas the most common thing I hear is that Henshaw and Ringrose complement each other perfectly, and they are the de facto number 1 centre partnership. So what's your thinking there?
I think he'll go for power in that game. I think he'll go for size. I will pick Gary Ringrose every time. Personally, just personal preference. I think he's a better attacker. But the 2 you put alongside him, and I think Bundy Aki has not let him down. He's played every game since he qualified to play for Ireland, and he's just been so robust. The way he set the tone against South Africa in his first cap with that tackle that ended the tight head props game. Since then, his pass in Twickenham, and then you've got Robbie Henshaw, who is the Joe player who he's nailed his colours to the mast. I wonder whether they're going to try and get Ringrose off the bench this weekend on the wing to give him the idea of maybe putting him at that number 23 jersey. Will we see Robbie Henshaw play 15 at some stage over the next 4 weeks? Because if you have all 3 of them fit, they're 3 of your best players, but they all play in the same kind of, in the same department. I wouldn't put any money on those. Well, certainly I wouldn't want to put any money on those teams, because the one I got for this weekend is already wrong because lads have been left behind. It was more of an exercise in trying to work out how you might approach it. But I just think against the All Blacks, the importance in dynamism, in power, in the way that they play, I think the stock that Joe will put in defence are all factors that I think will play into it. But it's a toss of a coin selection. I don't think any of them will let you down. So if you pick Ringrose is, you're giving yourself a much better attacking option, because Ringrose plays as your second receiver.
He's a brilliant defender as well.
Excellent defender. Yeah. Misses more tackles than probably he'd like to do, but he tends to miss them in good areas. His stats wouldn't be fantastic, but I think the coaches know how intelligent he is.
Yes.
I just think that the power. I think he'll probably go with Henshaw and Ringrose next week, and then he'll go into back to that Henshaw Bundy, maybe with Ringrose off the bench, but I could be completely wrong on that.
No, totally, but it's an interesting point. Keith, do you feel strongly either way on what the best 2 is?
I think the best 2 are Henshaw and Ringrose. I think Bundy is very close, and I would differ to Rory in terms of defensively. I'd rather Ringrose as a defending 13, because I think that's where an awful lot of the difficulty against the All Blacks are on those decisions that you have to make outside your outside shoulder at 13, which is the most difficult area. And for me, he is the guy that is at the most comfortable within the Irish backline to be able to do it. The others are better tacklers in terms of big hit tacklers, without a shadow of a doubt. But I think that level of intelligence is needed against the All Blacks.
Finally then, I mean, what are we looking for here against Italy? It's, I don't want to say makeshift, but it doesn't feel like an absolutely strongest possible Italian side. They've had to move a few things. Conor O'Shea is making the point that we've never really landed a punch in Ireland. You know, he's saying we've never fired a shot against Ireland in the last 2 matches. I want this to be the first staging post to us actually firing a shot and make them sit up and notice that we're on our way or on the way. I think all the other countries feel that we are. Now, that said, Italy are on a record-breaking losing streak in the Six Nations. So, I mean, he's obviously talking about performance there. Like, what's a good day at the office for Ireland after nobody getting hurt?
It's very hard to tell. Like, this game has, the context is so weird. You know,
we're unbeaten at Soldier Field.
Unbeaten
Rory,
at Soldier Field. There's so much to come. The squad he sent out is very mix and match. I think get through unscathed, no injuries. Sure. I think a debut for Will Addison to see what, you know, can he carry that Ulster form in? What does Joe make of him? A debut for Ross Byrne, 80 minutes, or sorry, as long as possible for Joey Carberry at out half. I think that they'll want to win reasonably comfortably, but you know, the Treviso and the Debray have been better this year, so there are signs that the Italian game is moving in the right direction. I don't think they'll want, you know, the Italians will want to make a statement. Whether they're able to do it, it's hard to tell. You know, will Ireland be affected by the fact that Joe Schmidt didn't go out there till halfway through the week? There's so much unknown in this game. I think you would expect Ireland to win despite the fact that there is so many changes. Yeah. But I think it could be a patchy performance. It's a patchy looking week. Yeah. And, you know, they all know that the big hitters are back home, but that should get a reaction. Like they know how many big games there are to come. They all want to play against the All Blacks, so there's an incentive there. So I think it could be scratchy enough, but they should get the result, and they hopefully will get a couple of big performances out of it as well.
Patchy is a good word for it, Keith. It's kind of a strange week for the players as well.
It is, but I would be looking for something different. I would be looking for structure and process, and I know there are words that are just absolutely horrible when you talk about an emotional thing like sport.
Yeah, really up the romance there, Keith. Appreciate it.
Yeah, geez, I can't wait for that. You know,
Yeah.
But no, I just want to see. I want to see them play well, play to a structure. I don't want to see them get drawn into a loose game that you see everybody looking for an offload because they want to show that they can do an offload. I want to see that they do an offload that's the right play at the right time. For me, I'm looking for a high level of quality. And it just changes when you have all the different guys that are in there. But I don't think Joe Schmidt wants to see the guys that can play a barbarian-style game or a loose game. I think he wants to see guys who are able to play in units as a team, because this is the stepping stone to it is an Irish jersey, but to playing first 15. So they have to be able to be part of the structure that he has in, and that becomes very important. So I'm hoping that the team they've pulled in together. It's been a bit fractured, absolutely, but that's what their focus is on. That to say is, let's play like Ireland play, and let's go and deliver like Ireland deliver. And if that happens, I think then you have people who are knocking for the door. Other than that, you don't. So I think Ireland will win, and will win well. And my wish is that they'll play in the manner of which I've just said. Because if that happens, I think they have the capability to put up a decent score and to keep it tight and play well.
Okay. I'm going to go and well and truly suck at all the romance in the conversation now. So Martin Ziegler here in the London Times. Anti-doping chiefs in South Africa have expressed alarm at evidence that coaches and parents are complicit in what appears to be the growing use of anabolic steroids by schoolboy rugby players. So there were drug tests at this year's Craven Week, which is South Africa's annual festival for leading players in the country aged 16 to 18. So 6 positive findings for steroids. Each of the players had taken a cocktail of banned drugs. Some of them had been injected by their parents. In one case, a boy's mother wrote an affidavit saying she had injected the child with ampules as though it was vitamin B. There was a quote from one of the testing officials saying, "The sophisticated doper is probably the one we don't catch. It's the stupid doper that manages to get caught during Craven Week," this festival. "If you've taken steroids maybe 3 months before, you'll be clean when you're tested, more than likely, but of course that doesn't mean you're a clean athlete." So they carried out 122 tests across Craven Week in July. 6 players tested positive, just shy of 5%. And the test showed teenagers had taken several different anabolic products, nandrolone, testosterone, in some cases another breast cancer drug to counteract the side effects of steroids, which includes the development of breast tissue. Some of the players starting at 14 years of age. Horrific, Keith.
Absolutely horrible. And the only upside to that story is the fact that the South African anti-drug authorities came out so strongly against it. And the extension of that report is quite harrowing. You know, they say, look, we keep bringing this up to your attention. You need to start doing something about it. Look, I've got 3 sons in school. If that was on the table anywhere, there'd be absolutely uproar. You know, look, it's in a different country. It is in a country that has had, I don't know whether it's the biggest amount of failed drug tests or not, but there's far more seem to be fail over there. It seems to be part and parcel of it. It's soul destroying, as you described it there yourself. Let's suck the joy out of all this and the emotion out of all this. We just don't want to see it at all in any way, shape or form. And I don't know what we can do in terms of that, because there's a one-liner in that frightens me. It says the sophisticated guys aren't being caught. Yeah. I mean, who's sophisticated at 14 or 15 years of age going to Craven Week? And Craven Week is this huge shop window for young school talent in South Africa. It is one of the biggest sporting events. It is the entry into professional rugby. And if there's 5% are showing up, and that, you know, it is actually soul destroying to see that would be part and parcel of it. And I don't quite know what it is that you're supposed to say or do in that. I mean, traditionally, kids aren't tested, I don't think. They absolutely should be, you know, because we have to make certain we get this out of the sport.
Where are you in this, Roy? Like, South Africa's reputation is very poor right throughout rugby. It's very poor. Like, do you get to a point where you're treating South Africa like Russia to really try and clean up the game there?
I'm not sure. I mean, the one thing I'll say in South Africa's defence is that they test their schoolboys, where we don't.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, that quote from the anti-doping official said that one of the attractions was that this is televised sport, that, you know, the players want to perform on TV, which, you know, schools rugby is here as well. I would, you want to be vigilant. There's nothing, I'm not coming out and saying the players here are definitely doping at underage level, but we are seeing, you know, the drugs authorities hauling, record hauls of steroids every year. There's a culture of doing steroids for aesthetic use. I think Irish rugby has to be just as vigilant. I'm not, you know, I also think that Irish rugby has to be careful when they're shopping in the South African market, because of the, you know, Philip Brown at the height of the Grobbler stuff last year said this is a very different rugby environment. Well, you know, it's the same. It's a rugby environment that Ireland have recruited probably more heavily than any other nation, due to the number of players and the talented players that are there, but also due to their size. Yeah. So I don't know if you can, like, if they are making, you do hear about more positive tests coming from South Africa, which I suppose gives them that black name. Yeah. Are they doing more testing? Are they better at testing? That, you know, are they better at going in? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you can punish them as a nation, but certainly
I'm talking down the line, 10 years time. I don't know how you fix it.
Nor do I. I just think World Rugby, they need to look at all the different avenues. But like, you know, the bans and all that sort of stuff, we've seen it in so many other sports. We've seen it across the board. They don't necessarily work. There's a cultural thing with steroids in kids, you know, that I don't understand as someone who's 35. I just don't get how kids are doing that. It's deeply worrying. I found that report really, really concerning this morning, and I don't think, you know, for all that South Africa seems to be a hotbed, there are conditions there that I see replicated here in England, you know, across the board. And I think it would be naive to say that nothing is happening in any of those places, because players are coming out of school ready for professional rugby, and there's no testing going on. And I think there should be, for the sake of those who aren't as well, as much as anything, and for the safety of the kids playing the game.
Yeah, human nature is human nature. I'd be in big trouble if I didn't just quickly keep touching the fact, and we're going to do something on this next week. I think Alan English is going to come up, and we're chasing Tony Ward and a few people. It just didn't quite work out today, but it's obviously 50 years since 78. Were you there?
40 years.
40 years, sorry, excuse me.
You'd have put me under huge pressure. You'd have aged me very badly. Do you know what? 300,000 people said they were there. I've said this before. I may have been. Yeah. I would have been 6 years of age. I have no memory of it. I could have been there with my father, but I'm not sure. It is a day that that lives on long, you know, and those players meet up all the time, and it's an incredibly interesting story. It still is an interesting story, and there is elements of magic in it. I interviewed Donald Caniff for the BBC about 5 or 6 years ago. God, it could have been 10 years ago now, actually, and he told me things I hadn't known about it. It's something that needs to be visited again, just because it was so rare and at such a time, and with so many things kind of against it. And in many ways, that's the part that started some of the Munster myth of
miracles and
miracles and impossibility and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I read Tony Ward's articles during the week. Yeah. Look, it's it's magic footage when you look at it. The old Thomond Park and the crowds and the carnage of people jumping up and down in the air. Good scores too, you know.
Yeah.
But, interesting.
Well, we finished off with some romance, which is
just a nice touch, no harm.
Eir Sport, by the way, sponsoring Wednesday Night Rugby here. They have matches this weekend. So Benetton against Ulster is on Saturday, 4 o'clock, Eir Sport 1. They have Leinster down in South Africa, Eir Sport 1 as well, 2:45 kick-off there. And then Sunday, Cheetahs against Munster, also on Eir Sport 1 at 4:45. So that's pretty much us done here for this evening. Keith Wood, thank you. And Rory O'Connor from the Irish Independent. Thanks, Rory.
Thanks, Joe.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With